to 7. He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them.
Well, hello and welcome to this edition of Islands at War. My name's Nick Le Huray. There's no Keith this week. If you were tuning in expecting the July 1943 edition, unfortunately, I spoke to Keith yesterday. He has succumbed to the lurgy. He really doesn't sound very well at all. We did think about recording remotely, but he's losing his voice, and we didn't really think it would get the best out of all of the stuff that we've got to tell you about for July 1943. Wishing Keith a speedy recovery, but never fear, we still have an episode for you. Back in the summer, we were asked to go along to the Specsavers Tea Dance and record some interviews, which we did, and we haven't had an opportunity to use those. So those will be coming up shortly. We'll be talking to people who had various different experiences as evacuees and having stayed here in Guernsey as well. So those will be coming up very, very shortly, and hopefully you'll find those enjoyable. If you're worried about the fact that this isn't the July 1943 episode, and that means we're going to be out of sync for Christmas, please don't be concerned. We are still planning on being all Christmassy for December 1943 in December 2025. Just to record an extra edition with Keith when he's feeling better, and we'll put that out as an extra podcast. So coming up now, I had a lady called Mary J wrote in to me telling a slightly different story to those that we normally hear about, those that were evacuated, because Mary's experience was a little bit different because her father was involved with the War Office and the military, and he was stationed here in Guernsey up at Fort George. So Mary got evacuated along with the troops and families of the troops, which is not a story that you often hear. So as Mary wrote in an email rather than recording with us, I asked Katie Roger if she'd be kind enough to voice the story of Mary J in June 1940 being evacuated. Over to Katie.
I remember leaving Guernsey when I was 8 years old in 1940. My father, an ex-soldier, was working for the military at Fort George, and we lived in the cottage there above lower lines. It was an idyllic place to live on the cliff, and the garden was edged with tall fuchsia bushes. At the time, the convent of Our Lady on Cordier Hill, where I had been a pupil for 3 years. My dad used to return home for lunch each day, and this day was no different. When he returned for supper, he told us that he had been instructed by the War Office to return to the office that evening and burn all sensitive papers, and then he and his family would be on the midnight boat to Southampton. There must have been frantic communications to our relations, including my maternal grandmother and paternal grandfather, both who remained on the island during the occupation. My mother, who had been helping a friend pack the belongings they were taking with them, was already fatigued, but she had to set to and decide what to take with us. She pulled out the cabin trunks and packed what she could. I went to bed semi-dressed at 7 p.m. and slept for a while, till I was woken at 11 p.m, ready for when the taxi arrived. I remember unusual things like the backs of my legs against the cold leather seat of the taxi. Not that it was cold, being midsummer. We did not use taxis normally. Also, I was constantly looking at my new Ingersoll watch, which I had been given for my 8th birthday. We arrived at the White Rock, which was in chaos, and crowds of people were milling about in all directions in the dark. It was not long before we were told to board a troop ship waiting in the dock. I have since wondered which ship it was, and research has not provided a definitive answer, although the Marine Society at Canford Cliffs in Dorset, where I live now, have given me several suggestions. If only I had asked my dad. Once on board the troop ship, men were separated from the women, so my mother and I were sent to seats in one area and my father to another. We were all in box life jackets attached to our chest, which were not very comfortable. My mother, who was exhausted, fell asleep with her head lolling forward. I was too excited to sleep. About 5 a.m, my mother awoke and said to me, "I suppose we are nearing Southampton." I said, "No, we have not left Guernsey yet." It was a long night and following day. Mines in the Channel had caused a delay in departure. We eventually arrived in England and then travelled by rail to Herne Bay in Kent. My father had wired his aunt to ask whether we could come to stay for a few weeks. During the war years, my parents received 5-word messages via the Red Cross from her mother. What could one say of interest in 5 words? It was disheartening not knowing how they were faring on the islands. We used to attend the Channel Island Society meetings in Reading, where we were eventually billeted for 3 years as my father was moved from Canterbury Barracks to Reading, where he continued to work for the military. At these meetings, we would be able to help keep a sense of belonging to the islands, hearing news of loved ones, etc. After the war, we learned of the hardships faced in the last days of occupation, where there was literally nothing to eat. They said that all the dogs and cats gradually disappeared. Some of my grandmother's relations were not poor, which helped them survive by getting food on the black market. Tea was £1 for a very small quantity. Know about the Potato Peel Pie Society. It was true. The fishermen were allocated very little to use in their boats, but they were only allowed to fish when the Germans said so. We have missed the tide, they would say, but the Germans did not listen. Fish must have been quite a luxury.
Well, thanks very much to Katie for voicing that. I hope you found that of interest. There were a couple of things actually that I'd pick up on. There was a real concern about mines in the channel. Mary mentioned those in her email, and I can well see why that would have caused a departure. Frankly, given the military situation at the time, it's a bit of a miracle that none of the ships evacuating Channel Islanders were actually attacked with any veracity or indeed inadvertently wandered into a minefield or suffered any damage from such. So that really is a bit of a miracle, but obviously there was sufficient caution taken with the approach towards as such matters and making sure that it was as safe as possible, while as safe as these things can be in wartime, to go ahead and ship the men and their families away from the island. This, of course, was a big, big blow to those that were left behind. So if you haven't listened to the June 1940 episode, way back, oh gosh, I think that's about 59 episodes or 58 episodes back now. If you want to go back and have a listen to that, we talk a little bit more about what it was like for those who were evacuated, those that stayed behind, and how everybody felt about the fact that the British had departed and declared the island to be demilitarised, albeit the Germans didn't know at that point. Mary talked about the Channel Islands Society meetings, and you might wonder what those were. We've referred at various points and various episodes of the podcast about the Channel Islands Monthly Review. That review was published in Stockport, and it was a roundup of all the things that have been going on in those Channel Islands Society meetings around the country. Wherever there were people who had been evacuated by the middle of the war, there had sprung up a Channel Island Society which was affiliated to that, as well as the Channel Island Monthly Review, also containing articles written for the review, exchange of messages, reprinting Red Cross messages and things. The Channel Island Societies organised activities for those who evacuated, just to try and make the best of things. So they had a variety of things, entertainment, meeting clubs, etc. Especially important for those who perhaps English wasn't their first language, and Guernesey, the local language, may have been their first language, so initially settling in was potentially a bit of a problem. Mary also talked about the Potato Peel Society. The film The Potato Peel Society is obviously a fiction. However, as Mary quite rightly points out in her email, it was indeed true that people were reduced to eating things like potato peel, and there were even instructions given. And, people would get told off for peeling potatoes too thickly, leaving too much potato on the peel. And people would go scavenging for potato peel to use to make such a pie. Mary also talked about the fishermen, which of course is a subject close to my heart because I've written a book about escapes, which is with the editors at the moment at the publishing house, will be out very shortly. I know there's a number of people that have written in who are eagerly awaiting that. That will be out as soon as possible. But whilst I've been looking at the activities of the fishermen and those who escaped, an awful lot of whom were fishermen by trade, and that's how they had access to boats, was the difficulties they had with getting petrol. And I found Mary's description of that quite interesting, because I'd recently come across someone who escaped. In their notes, they record that the petrol was ersatz petrol. It wasn't petrol as we know it today. It was sort of manufactured using various different things. It was sort of wood alcohol and all sorts of things like that. And they talked about it being muddy like a bad ersatz coffee as they tipped it into the fuel tank, which doesn't sound like it's going to be a great thing. Anyway, just wrapping up on Mary's message as well. She talked about the Red Cross messages. Those, of course, varied in length throughout the war, but I think the maximum was 25 words later on. And of course, once D-Day happened, everything was cut off. There was very, very difficult to get any Red Cross messages either in or out of the islands at that point until the Red Cross ship Vega made it to the Channel Islands in December 1944. So back to the stories. Now, the next one that I have is about somebody that was actually here during the occupation. One of the gentlemen that came to speak to us when we were recording up at Beausejour at the Specsavers Tea Dance. Now, the audio in places is a little bit patchy on this one. Apologies for that. We have done the best to clean it up, but I still think it's worth a listen. The area where we've been given to record, we were competing against a live swing band that was playing in the main hall. So that made recording a little bit on the difficult side, but it was really a good place because we found lots of people who would come along and talk to us because they saw us sat there with our stand. So without more ado, I'll introduce you to this gentleman who was here during the occupation.
My name is Thomas Boalch, and I lived with my parents in the Evacuee, which was, there was villages of the soldiers all around me. They was first resident in Nigeria, which is now St. Park, the butcher center.
Yep.
And there was one soldier that kept walking up and down and looking in my mother's house, and he saw that my mother had a sewing machine there to the window. So eventually he came in and asked if he could use it, which you couldn't say no. So, but he was very good because he was a tailor by trade. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a couple of repairs for the uniforms for that there. And it was very nice. With little old Charlie. Yeah. When we were really short of food, he used to bring me and my sister over a slice of his German bread. And then every other Sunday, he would take me with him. The next week would use part of his washing up.
That's incredible because they were running out of food as well, weren't they? It's a very kind thing for him to do.
My dad whisper.
Yep. Yeah, your crystal radio, yep.
Radio, which he used to listen to every night, 9 o'clock. Never knew. Now till when goes think my dad took him into his bedroom and showed him the list.
Okay.
And he said, wonderful man. And he was a vacuum had to go to England, of course, and he was at the special couple of years. When he was back home, he wrote my mum a letter. Wanted to come over and visit with his wife. So he brought his wife over to meet us, and they used to come up and they called my mum.
Excellent.
So then he brought his son over, which was just 2 years older than me, being a train driver over there. He brought him over, and that's before. Then he got married, the son got married, and he brought his wife over to meet us. And then he came back again with his 2 daughters. My mother went over and saw him, went over there to Nantes. I've been over and seen him. He's been over 3 or 4 more times, done his own as well. And then every Christmas, I send him a currency telling me I've moved.
What a wonderful story. It's amazing how many of the German soldiers actually did come back after the war. They were keen to show their families.
His name is in one of the bunkers which they had to go. He was on there, Televaza. He was doing to visit. I took his son down into a couple of bunkers and he came over. And he said, that's there.
Wow, that's incredible. Is that down at Fort Homme, down at Varzor? Yes, yeah. I'll have to look out for that.
But when he had
Brilliant.
and his wife.
Brilliant. What a great story. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of the tea dance to come and talk to us. I really appreciate it.
I tried to talk to someone else to press.
Oh, okay.
No,
Oh, that's a shame.
no. He was already on there. He was gone.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. That's been lovely, and enjoy the rest of the tea dance. Thank you. That'll have brought back memories for anybody who remembers Vimera, which, of course, stood at the bottom of the Rohays where the St. Pierre Park Hotel is these days. I vaguely remember it. I think I was probably about 10 when they knocked it down. So the hotel, of course, is still there on the site. And there are a couple of little bits of remains. If you know where to go and look in the gardens, you can find some steps that are still there going up from the grounds of the hotel up to where the golf course is. It just goes to show that not all of the Germans were perhaps unsympathetic to the plight of the locals, as we discuss frequently when we're talking about the Reverend Ord and his friend Reinhold. In John's case, of course, they came along and shared rations with the children when they themselves were very short of rations. So I hope you'll agree that was a very interesting talk from John. Coming up now, another interview that we carried out at the Specsavers Tea Dance. This one's slightly longer. It's a lovely lady called Val Le Feurve who talked about her late husband Bill's experiences as an evacuee from Guernsey. He was sent all the way up to Glasgow, so pretty much, you can't go an awful lot further away from Guernsey than Glasgow. As many, he found it a little bit of an adventure to start off with, perhaps not the sort of adventure he wanted, starting out in boys' home before being moved on to a family. So I shall hand you over right now to Val, who will tell us all about Bill's experiences.
Le Feurve was my husband, and he was evacuated from Guernsey when he was 10 years age. He was born in 1929. He lived in the Grand Boët. That's the school called them up at 3 o'clock in the morning just to take one bag of clothes that they could carry up to the school. He was evacuated with his two sisters. Daphne was aged 4. No, she wasn't 4. Gil was 10. She was 2 years older, so she was 12, and Hazel was 14. But on the I've forgotten the name of the boat that they went on. They had to go to the school and had 3 o'clock in the evening. They were taken down the Wi-Fi. Bill can always remember that on the Wartime, as they got down to the harbour, that the tomato lorries were there, and they were all given a basket of tomatoes to take on the ship. There were children crying to leave their mothers, but Bill and Hazel and Daphne didn't cry because they'd have no mum. And when they got to Dixon Hall in Glasgow, Bill can't remember going up on a train, but when they got to Dixon Glasgow, he was given 3 meals a day, and the school teacher and the headmaster for others were there. And they stayed in the halls for 2 or 3 days. Bill his dad had done West, and he pulled up as the reserves to go early on to the morning. Bill thought it was wonderful to be in the Dixon Halls. They got 3 meals a day, and so when they came on Sunday to take people out and then keep them in their home, both him and their skill, he was a big friend to their skill. They stayed in the home, all scruffy, making out they was fluffy and horrible, and they didn't get anything billets at all. And Bill is one of the last unless to be in the home. And Bill, unfortunately, got put with a woman from the baubles, and all she wanted was his money. His money got allowance and ration box, and she didn't feed him. She had 17-year-old son, and he would share the double bed with Bill, so Bill had to sleep in a chair for 5 years. He went to school at Porterhall School. Bill thought it was a wonderful adventure. I don't know how Bill had the sense, whether it was because he didn't have a mum, I don't know. Had the sense to do how he survived. 17-year-old boy that we shared bed with him. She used to make sandwiches, and he used to say, "There's a deep below sill." Because so you're not going to get much to eat. I know it sounds all what they did, but they used to look out on Miss McNeil at the school. And very often Bill used to skip the school and go on carrying bricks for the neighbours, so he'd get 6 minutes from the labourers to go in the brick. He was under 10, 11. He did get a good education, even though he did that. But after school, they used to go off and find the beer lorries, and they'd get on the back of the beer lorries, and then they were in the pub to pinch the beer and put them in the bag, and then they'd get off at the next set of traffic lights. But once they went to get off the traffic lights, and the traffic lights changed, and they had to walk 3 miles back home. But they used to find the American bases and creep through the hedge and call the soldiers over. And they used to swap the beer for cigarettes because they wouldn't get beer, the Americans, and they had plenty of cigarettes. So they used to go and sell the cigarettes, and then gave Bill some food. He could go and buy with what they sold for cigarettes. Then he enjoyed going to the snooker hall where they had billiards and snooker, but they weren't allowed in. I'll forget this. They said no short nippers, only long trousers. So Bill found a pair of this Alex or his name was, pair of his dungarees, and Bill cut off the tab, washed them in the wash house, and tied a piece of string round, and he was allowed in the billiard hall then to get a game. And he used to rub down the tables and get 6 months for rubbing down the tables in the billiard hall. And then they used to go to Ibrox football match, and he was Rangers supporter that then used to climb under the fence, and they'd go collecting all the McEwan's bottles after the game and put them in a sack and go and take them back to the shop for tuppence a bottle. So sort of always, they did do a bit of stealing. They used to pull one of the old men away from where the fruit was, like quick nick a couple of apples and run, that kind of thing. And the man from the tube shop, Italian, he knew Bill was out on the road late at night. She didn't care. And he used to save all the scraps from the fish for Bill. So no wonder Bill had a bad stomach when I got to know him. He used to eat all these fatty bits from the fish that he was good on the Italian man. And then you were supposed to get one set of clothes from the corporation. I don't know if it was every month or 2 months. I've got a lovely photo of Bill, and you can see the goat. It's an old man's coming off the buttons that he's got. He only got one set of clothes about a year. She was selling those clothes that he got from the corporation. So he never got what he was allowed from the corporation on totals. He had to clean all the stairs from the top of the baubles when it was her turn, and she'd keep the money. He did the work and all the wine stuff on the side. I was saying he had to work to what she said. He'd never go. He'd never get the money from that she had got from her place. He didn't know until the end of the war that all children should have got £2, 2 shillings a month and pocket money, and he never
had any.
The school teacher noticed that Bill didn't have any grey uniform, and he wished that he could have found her after the war. She very discreetly kind of used to say, "Oh, I found this jumper and I think it might suit you, Bill," and that kind of thing, so that he wasn't embarrassed that he wasn't in the right school clothes. On that, he really had a beautiful time. And then I didn't find out just before he died that he was a clever man, that he passed to Queen's College, which is he did the 11th class, which is the highest college, like Elizabeth College in Scotland.
Yeah.
And the headmaster called him and said, "Oh, your dad's was a reservist, so he's in the RAF. His father only went with him once, and his two sisters somewhere else. A couple of times when you tried to go and try together, nobody was looking after each other." And he said to him, "It's well done that you've passed to Queen's College," but he said, "The directors have been talking about it, and they think that in the position that you're in with your family, it could have been a millionaire." And he said, "We think it would be better if you don't go to Queen's College." He said that you go to Stoke College instead. He said, because he said, "I won't be able to afford other schemes and put those in all the uniforms and that." So Bill was 12, and he said, "Yeah, that's fine." He said that, so I can't think of any more. There were so many stories that he used to tell. Oh, he had to look after a little boy, Billy Forbes. Yeah, I moved on his 40 and a plump feet, and she was made to look after him. on a Sunday or Sunday. He used to take him across on the Queen's Ferry for a penny. He used to push him around the park, and he pushed him and ran after him, and he ended up running on in the park. And also took him out and dry his clothes before he took his home. He was forced to say, Bill, there's a wonderful adventure. Oh, did. And I used to write some of these stories that he used to tell me about going on the river. You know, nobody, not one, the figures in checked on you. They kept saying on one of the programs, all the children were checked on, and Bill said nobody ever came and checked where he was, if he was alive. If actually a 10-year-old now, in this day and age, thinking of all things to survive.
Was certainly very ingenious and industrious, wasn't he, in being able to do that, to look after himself.
Himself and managed to, well, to eat.
I know I've spoken to a few evacuees, and they very much said, very similar to you, it started out as one big adventure because a lot of them hadn't left the island before.
Nobody.
And it tended only to be people with quite a bit of money or a reason to go for business or whatever that used to go away. So, yeah, a lot of them said it was all a bit of an adventure. Yeah, there were some, as you say, some terrible times had by some people. That some of the people that were looking after the children were not as nice as the others.
The churchgoers, they only did it because, of the status in the church. They said Bill's sister was made to knit. As soon as she came back from school fair, got the Scottish jumpers and the fair off, like that. And she had to knit for at least about 4 hours every day. So, no, it certainly was an eye-opener that not everybody was well after. But I think because he didn't have a mom as well, you know what I mean? I think that helped. That already the three of them from 2, 4 and 6 had been with people coming in. The old dad had to find somebody used to be full to them. Phil was not well and he vomited or something, and she hit him on the back of the legs with a wooden spoon and that kind of thing. Bill was pleased to get out and get going.
Yeah.
The other thing is, he said on the boat when they were all crying, they used to wet the bed. You all had these canvas beds. So Bill and theirs used to make sure they go through the beds and make sure it was one that wasn't wet before they slept on it the next night. So that definitely they were good people. Yeah, Bill said the preparation.
Yeah.
The Pasco in under preparation, and they used to have to go for a bath once a week. You went with the twins. Did you ever know what were they called? What's the name? They were evacuated there. On one side, they used to have to go to the baths for a bath. The corporation and that got into trouble because they threw a piece of soap or something over into the next one. One of them climbed up to look. It was one of the lady teachers. That's all they were saying. They must look, it was Terry, and she mustn't dare fingers with her brush. And when they got back to school, she said, "All of you put your hands out and let's see who it was."
Dear.
Nothing to put it together. This really. Like, especially when we used to go on Russian and we got talking, especially the American. Soon they heard you were from Guernsey. They'd say, they wouldn't say anything like France. And then they'd say, you were fine. They would multiply the chat and say, it's dead keen to speak to anybody that has Guernsey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time out to come and talk to us. A very interesting discussion there with Val. And again, apologies for the quality of the sound. As I say, we were competing against a big band, which we had to get rid of from the background using all the technology tricks and gizmos. So it wasn't quite the normal standard of audio a very, very interesting story. And it sets out the varying experiences that people had throughout their experiences as evacuees, and some of them not always a happy story. Obviously, Val's husband, Bill, had less than a happy time, although it would seem that he made the best of. So that's the end of the interviews that we've got for you this week. We have got a couple of things coming up. One that I do want to flag for anybody that is in Guernsey on the 3rd of December. Friend of a show, Tim Osborne, we've interviewed him a couple of times. Tim's a pilot by day, but very, very interested in the history of the Channel Islands. He's also a tour guide, a very knowledgeable chap. I've been on a couple of his tours. He's been kind enough to come and talk to us about various things on the podcast. There's a couple of episodes about we have spoken to him in the past or referred to some of his work, and he's got something coming up at the Guernsey Aero Club. It's called Jacob's Story, which a couple of years ago he produced a short film that was based on a photo album that he acquired many, many years ago of German naval NCO who was stationed in Guernsey during the occupation. Tim's been quite busy, so it's been on a bit of a back burner for a couple of years, but he's just finished a 33-minute long film that is a mix of Jacob's life story, some never seen before now and then photos. The film itself is text and music with no talking or narration, but it produces, I'm told, an interesting and emotional journey. And Tim, as I mentioned, talented musician, has composed a song at the end as a tribute to him, someone who had a life like you and me, but who no longer exists. Now, Tim's very kindly trialling this film on the 3rd of December 2025 up at the Guernsey Aero Club. You don't need to be a member to be able to go. Doors open at 7 p.m. With an 8 p.m. start. So that will be well worth attending. So I highly recommend you go along and take a look at that. I believe Tim is planning to show it again next year, part of the Liberation celebrations. But if you want to get in quick and see it before anybody else does, I recommend going along to that. And if you want something else to look forward to, there's going to be Channel Island Occupation Society Christmas tea at the Villette Hotel, and that's on Saturday the 20th of December. It starts at 2:30 p.m. Keith and myself will be there, and we're going to be presenting some surprising things we've found out when we've been knee-deep in our research, both for the podcast and other projects, but we're going to be talking about some surprising things. There'll be plenty of photographs. There'll be some photographs that have not been seen before in the Channel Islands that we have obtained, which may be of interest. There's a couple where we're trying to work out exactly where they are. So if you come along, you might be able to help us either solve one of the mysteries or help us with exactly where the photograph was taken. So as I say, that's 2:30 on the 20th of December. We'll also be talking a little bit about people's Christmas experiences during the occupation, both here in the Channel Islands, what it was like for those who had been deported by the Germans in later periods of the war, and also what it was like for the evacuees, those that had been evacuated to the UK. We've also got some other exciting things coming up, thanks to Dave Hewitt, listener to the show, who has been in touch. Dave has been interested in the occupation since he first came to the island in 1980, and he has a vast collection of items relating to the occupation. He's going to be over in December, and he's very kindly agreed to meet up and have a bit of a chat about his interest in the occupation of the Channel Islands. I'll be meeting up with Dave to have a chat about why he's so interested in the occupation, some of the things that he has in his collection. He sent me some WhatsApp photos. He really does have quite a vast collection of items, and he assures me that the photographs that he sent me are not in any way all of the things that he has. So I'm looking forward to catching up with Dave towards the end of December, just before Christmas. That probably won't go out until January, but thanks very much to Dave for getting in touch with us. We do love hearing from our listeners, so if you do have a question, do get in touch, or you want to share your interest in the occupation. You know, you've got relatives that were here, or you've got a large collection of items, or you've just want to tell us about your experiences of visiting the island. Please do get in touch with us. You can get us by email on occupied@gnetradio.com. Alternatively, you can find my website, island-fortress.com. There's contact details on there. You can get hold of me on there. There's a lots of photographs and blog pictures. We're on Twitter. I still can't get around to calling it X. You can find Islands at War on Twitter. You can have a look at the stuff that we put on our socials there, including photographs which relate to the episodes, or drop us a direct message or interact with us if you've got a question. We're also on Facebook as well, so you can go and look our Facebook page up. Looking further ahead, we've been contacted by Susan McDonald, who is an author and who has been to the island. She's coming over next year. We're going to have a chat with her because some of her books, although they're novels, do run into occupied Channel Islands times. I'm going to be having a chat with her. Keith and I will no doubt get together with her, but that's going to be in the summer. So just something to look out for there. So that's a couple of things for you to look forward to. Once again, apologies for this not being the July 1943 episode. I really do hope that Keith is better soon. So time for me to say cheerio, and I hope you've enjoyed the show.
He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them on someone. It's 5 to 7. All his friends and family had gone. Left on a ship 'cause they knew